everybody. This is What Does the Bible Say? This is our live television, school time television broadcast. And so this morning we are still doing our study of the kings of Israel. And I'm opening my Bible. So, as we get started, we want you to be opening your Bible, okay? This is a 2-hour-long class, and so we always say it's a good idea if you're someone who can to turn your phone on vibrate. And so what we want to do is we want to get the most out of this Bible class. And so if you have people buzzing into your thought process every 5-7 minutes, it's going to be difficult. So we say get your King James wide margin Bible out, get a notepad. And so we go through this 2-hour class. You're not going to remember everything out of the class. So you can be as messy as you need to be on your notepad, get your notes down, and a way to work your memory bank is you write it down on a notepad. That's one layer, one coat of paint. You revisit your notepad, you transfer the notes that you want to keep into the margins of your King James Bible, the wide margins of your King James Bible. That's a whole nother layer for your memory bank. Somebody says, I'd like to have a better memory. Well, that's how you do it, is you find different ways to spend time with it. You're listening to the class, you're hearing the information, you read along in your Bible, you need to know where things are in your Bible. Now, I think that this week and then next week's class, we should be able to wrap up the life of David, and then we're going to be moving into Solomon. And so this morning, what I want us to do, this is what we're looking at. And so I've said this before. You study David. What do you know about David? People know David kills Goliath, and you just know those sermon after sermon about defeat your giants. And usually that just translates to like health and wealth gospel. Defeat your giants. Then you get over to David and Bathsheba, and it's overcome your temptation. And it's like, that's good. You want to overcome your temptation. Romans 6. Do we just sin that grace may abound? God forbid. So yeah, you overcome your temptation. But really it's a case when you're looking at David who does not overcome his temptation. What do we do after that? Let me have just a moment. What do you do after that? And so this segment of Scripture that we're in, which is a very big block, it is 2 Samuel, really the study of Absalom is 2 Samuel 13 to chapter 19. And you might say, well, he dies in 18. Yeah, but you're dealing with all of the fallout in chapter 19, which is how problems work. You shouldn't basically think, if you do get to resolve an issue, right? You get to somehow put a stamp and say, okay, that has been concluded. It's really not concluded. It's probably going to bleed over into something else, so you need to keep your head up. So this morning when we get into this is what we're going to talk about. This is how you do Absalom. What value is there to Absalom? And I think that a lot of people just overlook it and they just go on to, who knows, Solomon, I guess. So this morning I am doing this class and I'm saying the application in a very large general sense is going to be between you, your preacher, and your elders. And so if we were organizing ourselves correctly, we would have on the board you, your evangelist, and the elders. And so I've been making a lot of points that it's not the correct idea for the elders to hire one man to do their job. It's the job of the elders to be teaching the congregation the things that they need to know, and the preacher, who really should be designated to going out and studying with lost people, is spending all of his time teaching already saved people. But what I'm saying is, really, these are personalities, these are imperfect people who are trying to work together. And so the people in the pew, because the preacher is always the mouthpiece, the people in the pew, more times than not, they have problems with the preacher. And then the elders start kind of hearing the murmurings of the people, and they're starting to think about sending the preacher on his way, fire him. And now the preacher has a problem with the elders because the preacher's saying to the elders, why are y'all not backing me up? You know this is the truth. It's what the people need. So, as we look at this morning, David, Absalom, Joab. You, your preacher, the elders. This is all information that everybody needs in order to keep we do not want to keep a congregation together of miserable people. We want a happy, healthy, flourishing congregation. And so this is why we're doing this information. Because if you are somebody who is evangelistic, I understand. You say, well, Caleb, I think about doing evangelism. You're outside of this area. You say, I think about doing evangelism, but I wouldn't want to bring these people to this congregation. I hear you. But look, we basically have two jobs. So look at this point of Scripture. This is Colossians 3. We are, in fact, inviting people to atmospheres that we have yet to create. But they still need the truth. And when you bring them in, you can just inform them, look, things right now are not what they ought to be, but we're working at it. So this is what we ought to be shooting for. Put on therefore, this is Colossians 3, verses number 12 through 15. Put on therefore as the elect of God, holy, beloved, bowels of mercy, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, also do ye. And above all things put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also ye are called in one body, and be ye thankful. And that's my point at the end. It's underlined, be ye thankful. Look, if you're not happy to be here, go on somewhere. Like if we're trying to have charity, which is love, and it said it is the bonding element. It is the bond of perfectness. So if we are trying to have the bond of perfectness and you're still not happy, then go take your misery somewhere else. That is company that we don't need. We are called into one body. And if you look at verse number 13 where he says, forbearing one another, that implies that you are going to be having problems. So don't wake up one day and say, I don't understand why we're having these problems. It's people. And the more people you have, the more problems you're going to have. We're all different people with different backgrounds, different age groups, different gender, all these different problems that can arise, will arise. And we have to have an attitude to work with each other. And nobody's talking about sweeping stuff under the rug. We're talking about correcting things. But realizing people are not going to take it overnight. People don't change overnight. So yes, this is the atmosphere we're wanting to create. Kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another, the bond of perfectness in one body, and being thankful that we even get to be in one body. But David, Joab, and Absalom is going to be a picture of what it looks like, and it's going to be a picture of all the actions that are going to have to be taken in order to preserve a one working body. So this morning, this is what does the Bible say? That was just an intro moment to say what we have in store for this class this morning, 2 hours long. So if you're in the local area, my phone number is 276-806-3641. So if you're somebody who wants to get together, have Bible study, tell you, our time and our energy is limited. And I had somebody the other day, it's like they kind of started talking to me about wanting to have a Bible study, and then it turned into they wanted to give me financial advice and all this other stuff. And it's like, my limited time and energy, I don't want that. You know what? I can listen to Dave Ramsey like the rest of you. I just don't need somebody sitting down to have a Bible study with me about finances. I'm trying to help people with unity in the religious community, and we all go to heaven. I appreciate you thinking about me to say, here's some financial tip. But, you know, that's just not what I'm shooting for. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like, that's the thing about the religious community, too. It's like nobody wants to talk about the Bible. They started talking to me first about the Bible, and then it turned into they've got like some monetary idea. And it's like, that's what people's issues are. We can't get on a solid course together, which is help people go to heaven, without somebody saying, hey, can I talk to you about my particular expertise that has nothing to do with the Bible? My email address is Caleb G. Robertson. What am I saying? If you want to contact me locally and have Bible conversation and we discuss differences, I have no problem you disagreeing with me. I don't want to leave it at a disagreement, though. So here's my thing. If you want to talk, be ready to have somebody disagreeing with you, because I'm ready for you to disagree with me. But I'm saying if you respect the Bible and I respect the Bible, I do believe, like, people just act like it's just ridiculous. Someone asked me the other day, they were saying, do you think that a person can honestly disagree with you? Well, yes, of course. But if they're honest and they respect the Bible, and I'm honest and I respect the Bible, then somebody's going to change. And maybe it's me. Right? People are saying, do you need to change? Look, all I'm saying is prove to me why from the Bible that I need to change. And that's where usually people start dropping off. I can't help that people don't work hard to articulate their ideas. But if you want to try, I'm open to trying with you. 276-806-3641, CalebGRobertson@gmail.com. If you email me, we will put you on the Informer list, which is a weekly page-and-a-half Bible article. It's like a church bulletin, but we don't waste time with busy stuff. You get people's church bulletins, a bunch of local busy work that nobody else needs to know, but we're trying to get thoughts into people's heads. And so this last week we had a conversation about grace. Preachers are people too. If you don't recognize that preachers are people and people make mistakes, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. How could they? That's the first paragraph. How could they? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about King David today. Do you still like King David at the end of the story? Yeah, I still like King David. Then what's your problem with everybody else? It's unrealistic. So, get on the Informer list. You get it in your email inbox every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. And if you are local and you're living in the Martinsville area, we would encourage you to be checking out the Martinsville Bulletin. At the rate that we're going right now, we're getting to have at least an article in the paper once a week. And this, yesterday, Tuesday, we had an article in the local Martinsville Bulletin. Censorship is bad no matter what side you're on. I tell you, I don't always get to pick the headline, but I write the article. And so it has to do with public schools in Virginia and the books in their library. And so I'm saying, y'all, the idea is you keep trying to censor these books you don't agree with. You're on the conservative Republican side, you keep trying to censor these books you don't agree with, they're going to start censoring the books that you like. And then everybody's going to be crying about why I like that book. And so I think the idea is we need to cut back on censorship. You may not agree with that, but I'm saying when it starts touching the books you like, you'll agree with it. So, local, check out the Martinsville Bulletin. Even if you're not local, you just want to look for the articles that we have in there, you can subscribe digitally from out of town. No problem with that. And, of course, this morning, if you're watching outside the area, you're watching on YouTube, and you can let your cousin Ted know in Wisconsin, hey, what does the Bible say is doing their class? I had to take 2 weeks off. I was off for Thanksgiving, and then after Thanksgiving, I got sick, and so I couldn't come in. And but here we are today. So everybody's had a break, and you've forgotten what the last class was about, so we're going to have a refresher. This class is designed to help you better know your Bible without moving across America. 2 Chronicles 11:14 and 15, verse number 9. If you are so inclined to move to this area, that is a possibility, and there's a biblical precedent. But you need to be aware, we do turn people away, right? We have told people it's not a good idea for you to move here. They don't have the same mind. That's 1 Corinthians 1. It's in Philippians. It's what Paul says about Titus and Timothy. He says these are people of like mind. If you want to come work, that's one thing. If you want to come and start developing yourself to New Testament mold, that's one thing. But some people who want to come in and just say, hey, this is me, and you take it or leave it, we will take the choice of leaving it in a heartbeat. So, you need to make up in your mind if this is what you really want to do. And all of it's designed to prep you for evangelism. And there's two things that I like to hit on in the daytime broadcast. It's God's grace and evangelism. And I believe that people are not evangelistic because they don't have a good idea of God's graciousness. And so if you're not enjoying being a Christian, I doubt that you're going to share it with anybody. But 2 Timothy 2:2, we're trying to train people so that they can train other people. We invite you to be a part of studying sin seriously every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. So here's notes from last time. Like I said, we had 2 weeks off, so everybody forgot about it. What happened last time was we talked about Joab. We said Joab's brilliance, and I do think that he is brilliant. There is so much, I've said this before, and this is the way we're doing this class. We're not studying 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. We are doing the kings of Israel. So we're putting all the books in one. And so when these are some of my favorite, like I'm saying, as far as Old Testament goes, this is it. This is my favorite. The kings of Israel, because of the politics. I call it's classic literature. This is entertaining to read. It is informative. It should help you interact with your fellow man. Be calculated, man. People talk about why. I tell you, I lost my temper. I started seeing red, and I forgot the rest of it. Man, that's dumb. You can say all you want to. I can't control. I can't help it. Yes, you can. And people make it harder on themselves when they have moments like that. Joab is calculated. David is calculated. And somebody might say, yeah, but they still get into messes. Yeah, but they start working to get out of it. So, some people get in a mess and they're stuck in it because they can't think how to get out of it. So here's what he does. He makes a calculated decision. Absalom was way up north in Syria. Why? Because his mother was Syrian. His grandfather on his mother's side was a Syrian king. Someone says, why did you say it that way? Because there's a difference between Syria and Assyria, right? So I'm trying to make sure that people know I'm talking about the Damascus region up north, Syria. His grandfather on his mother's side was a Syrian king. So when he starts having problem with his dad, the king of Israel, he goes to his granddad, the king of Syria. Well, Joab basically would say, I don't like the idea of him being up north plotting against us with being able to be in a whole other king's ear. So Joab brings Absalom home. Well, while that was calculated and a good idea, somebody says, well, you couldn't have done it any better. I believe that. Well, when Absalom comes home in 2 Samuel 15, he steals the hearts of the people. He sets himself up in the gate. We made points that Absalom is a very hard worker. And that's the thing that people need to recognize is your opponents can be hard workers. I know we tend to think that anybody who doesn't agree with us is an absolute lazy idiot, but they can be hard workers. And they can surprise you. And Absalom surprised everybody. He came in, it says he rose up early in the morning. He met with the people face to face. I say door knocking works. He met with the people face to face. And he told them, your ideas are good and right. If only there was somebody out here to give you judgment. And he started doing it. And when he led the conspiracy, Ahithophel, who was David's counselor, he sides with Absalom. And at that moment, the text actually says, they said back to David, the conspiracy is strong. And then David says, we need to flee. And so our point from that was, a lot of people would say, well, that's bad call for David, lack of faith, and we put all kinds of negative connotation. And my statement was, ego says retaliate. And I said, prudence says regroup. So they leave that area. David, Joab, Abishai, they regroup, they get their ducks in a row. And at some point they are going to, I don't think it's immediately, but at some point they're going to cross over the Jordan and be very much separated from Absalom. So this is what we said last time, and we had to rush through it. And so I want to begin with this because we're talking about you, your preacher, your elders. And so some people, we've made the statement already that we do not involve ourselves in personal. This is what somebody did the other day. They called my dad and they started talking trash about me. And it's like, Johnny, you need to be doing something about Caleb. Well, then it turned in they started talking trash about Dad. Whatever. Look, I'm not going to take that stuff personally. I can't remember, I had some dude from Florida call me, and he was arguing with me, and then he starts talking about my wife, who he's never even met. Well, that didn't bother me. I didn't get mad. I just said to him on the phone, I said, so now you're moving over to talking about my wife. And I said, you think that's helping your case over here? How? And so then he had to say, oh, okay, you're right. And he starts drawing himself back in. People can help it, but it's not going to help anything for me to get mad. So here's my point. You, your preacher, the elders, y'all are all working in the congregation, and you should be working towards evangelism and creating an atmosphere that outside people would even think to say, this looks all right. doing evangelism. Now, look at 2 Samuel 16. I said, these are the moments that really, they hurt. Your friends kick you while you're down. When David was a little past, this is 2 Samuel 16, the beginning of the chapter. David was a little past the top of the hill. Behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth. Who is that? That is Jonathan's son, who has been lame, paralyzed, all from his childhood. Mephibosheth's servant met him with a couple of asses saddled, and upon them 200 loaves of bread, and 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 summer fruits, and a bottle of wine. And the king said unto Ziba, What meanest thou by these? And Ziba said, The asses be for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and the summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine that such as be faint in the wilderness may drink. And the king said, Where is thy master's son? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he abides at Jerusalem. For he said, Today shall the house of Israel restore me the kingdom of my father. So we had a teacher once talking about himself. He said that he sold alarm systems, and he was walking around the town at night leaving his business card for businesses, and somebody had had their window smashed that night, and the police were out there and whatever was going on, and so they're doing the investigation, and he who sells alarm systems, he walks by, I don't have a card, but he walks by and he sees the business owner, and he says, when you get a chance, call me. And he told us, he said, I look back on that, and he said, I think, you opportunistic pig. And I said, no, the guy needs an alarm. I said, you were there at the right time. Some of your friends will, in fact, be opportunistic pigs. And they're not really your friends to begin with. And so I've had some people be friendly with me, and when they got a chance to try to cut my throat, they took it. Obviously, I'm okay. And that's why I say, there's no need to do personal. You know, they basically try to make their mark on you. They fail. You just move on. I pray for them. I do. And I think that's obviously the way the New Testament tells us to be. But I'm telling you, the people who live like that, they are miserable. And that's why I pray for them. And so you come in, you're already on the run from Absalom, and then you start finding out, you do a kindness for Mephibosheth a couple chapters ago, and now Mephibosheth is turning on you. And that stuff hurts. But it doesn't do anything to be personal with them. And we said last time, with war comes annoyances. You're having a battle with Absalom, and then someone named Shimei comes out of nowhere. He's the son of Gera. He's a Benjamite. He's from the house of Saul. And he comes out and he casts stones at David. This is still 2 Samuel 16. He cast stones at David, and all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand, on his left. And thus said Shimei when he cursed, Come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. The Lord has returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord has delivered the kingdom into his hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. And so we made a point out of this, and this morning, while we're doing a very brief refresher, I'm just saying I'm making a new point, okay? Do you think, and maybe we said this last time, so he's of the house of Saul. With Saul knowing what he now knows, do you think that Saul would actually approve of what Shimei is doing? We all know that Saul, in a moment of time, he chased David all over the countryside. But now, David has openly done a kindness to Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth. When Jonathan and Saul died, David praised the both of them. He said they were both beautiful in their time. And then Shimei comes out and he trashes King David, and he says all this stuff about Saul. And you have to ask, do you even think Saul would approve of what Shimei was doing? Now, here's my application or illustration of Shimei today. So if you can find them, there's 40 volumes from, 1830 to 1870. It's called Millennial Harbinger, written by Alexander Campbell. And before that, he had 7 volumes of The Christian Baptist. And so their idea starting at about 1823, their idea was to convince people to leave sectarian titles, to leave man-written creeds, man-made creeds, and their idea was to have less speculation, right? What does that mean? people get out there and they want to flex, right? They want to flex their expertise, and they basically show you these things in the Bible, and it's like this long-winded, drawn-out idea. I'm saying just like when you talk to Jehovah's Witnesses. And so Alexander and his father Thomas were saying, let's get away from stuff like that. Let me give you an example. I went to a congregation in Tennessee while I was in school. It was just down the road. And I went over there just to visit. Nobody knew I was coming, and no one from the school knew that I was going over there. And so I visit, and I sit through the classroom, the class hour, and when I go back to school and I tell everybody that I did go over there like on a Sunday night or a Wednesday night, and they said, did you sit through so-and-so's class? And I said, yeah. And then they said, did he talk about angels? And I said, yeah. And they said, that's all that dude ever talks about. So that man was on the Arnold Murray idea that, Genesis 6, Arnold Murray says to everybody that in Genesis 6, the angels came down from heaven and they fornicated with these women. And that's how giants were made. Angels fornicating with women, giants. And so they said, did he talk about angels and giants? I said, yeah. And then they said, that's all that dude ever talks about. And someone has to say, why? Why is it so important to him that everybody needs to hear about giants in Genesis chapter 6? I don't know. And it's like if you start making that a bone of contention and you're going to divide with people over giants in Genesis chapter 6, yes, that is sectarian. And so what Alexander was saying was, stop forcing these speculations on people. So, the question of, would Saul have even approved of what Shimei was doing? In the 1800s, obviously, like 100, what was the number? I'm going to say conservatively, even though I believe it to be higher. I can look at the history of the Presbyterians in Kentucky when I get back to my office. But I know that in Kentucky and the Presbyterians, at least 50,000 people were leaving Presbyterianism in the 1800s. Over a span of time, Alexander convinced Presbyterians to just be dropping Presbyterianism and just be Christians. Well, Alexander was in the middle of writing a whole series of articles for Millennial Harbinger, and his father Thomas says to him, do you mind if I interrupt your series to write an open letter to different disciples across the land? And he says, okay. He stops the series. Thomas writes an article, and do you know what it was? Thomas had to write to a whole bunch of people who loved what they were doing, and he had to say, y'all are missing the picture. And there's so much infighting going on right now, and he said that's what we were trying to get away from with the Presbyterians. All this bickering about man-made creeds, they make an itemized list, and he said, you guys are starting to make an itemized list with each other. Here's my point. Nothing about the Campbells. Now go to the New Testament. To see Shimei call out Saul's name, he said, you're getting back, David, what you did to Saul. And if Saul could have spoken, he probably would have said, hey man, I'm not even for that, okay? I'm not even with you on this. We have to be careful that we are actually representing the New Testament ideas and not just what we have come up with. You can, and everybody does it. Everybody says, like, well, this is what the New Testament teaches. Does it? This is what I'm saying. Are you really hitting what the New Testament is actually giving us the idea of being about? And I do believe that inside of the New Testament, whether it's 1 Timothy 4 or Titus chapter 3, verse number 9, I think that a lot of people are arguing about stuff that the New Testament would not have us be arguing about. We looked at Colossians chapter 3, forbearing and long-suffering with each other. Look, they're going to be there, but we need to be trying to work them out. And at some point, that's going to mean that some people are going to realize, hey, this thing I've been trying to fight about for like the past 5 years, maybe is not worth fighting about. Just a tidbit. We're fixing to move on to another tidbit. Then we said this. Shimei comes out, and then the people you're with, they're wanting to get into every fight that they can. Abishai sees Shimei, and he says, why don't we just kill this man? And this is what David says. What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? That is David's sister, David is the uncle. Abishai and Joab are his nephews. And he says they are too rambunctious for him. When they killed Abner, he said, y'all are too hard for me. He says, let Shimei curse, because the Lord has said unto him, curse David. Who shall then say, wherefore hast thou done so? And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son, which came forth out of my bowels, seeks my life. How much more now this Benjamite do it? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. David literally has to say to Abishai, we have bigger fish to fry. Now let's look at a point this morning. Speaking of bigger fish to fry, we're about to hit a tidbit. Folk keep spending all their time arguing about the next point that we're about to see, and let's be honest, this is my thought. Majority of the people are not even going to know that this text is in there to argue about it, which says what? They're not the Bible students that they think they are. Did Rahab lie? Someone says, good night, we back on this again. But I'm saying you go to any preaching school, this is the stuff they're arguing about. Did Rahab lie? Look at 2 Samuel in your Bible. 2 Samuel 16 through verse 19. We're going to see a man named, however you want to say these guys' names. Okay, some of them get pretty difficult and complicated. Hushai, Hushiah. You come up with another way, we'll say it that way. Then said Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, unto the king, why? And it came to pass, when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, was come to Absalom, that Hushai said unto Absalom, God save the king, and God save the king, God save the king. Now, refresher, we did this last time. Who is Hushai? Hushai is an individual that David actually has to say to him, hey, we're glad that you're with us, but it is the case that you showed up within the week. And we don't know that we can trust you. So we're not sending you to Absalom, but we're asking you to not be in the group right now because you might be a spy. And so Hushai says, I'm okay with that. But then they actually work out a plan where they say, if you're okay with that, why don't you be my spy? So David sends Hushai to be his spy in with Absalom's crowd. Now here's how it goes. It came to pass when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, was come unto Absalom, that Hushai said unto Absalom, God save the king, God save the king. And Absalom said to Hushai, is this thy kindness to thy friend? Why wentest thou not with thy friend? And Hushai said unto Absalom, nay, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his will I be, and with him will I abide. And again, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in thy father's presence, so will I be in thy presence. And now someone's going to say, did Rahab lie? She said the spies went out and I don't know where they went. And she actually had the spies up on our rooftop. Here, what's his name? Hushai goes into Absalom, and Absalom says, what are you doing here? He says, I'm here to work for you. And everybody looks at this text and they say, did Hushai lie? And my statement is, it is not a lie, it is espionage. That is the exact same way that we talk about, it's not murder when soldiers in the Old Testament go out to battle and they actually kill their enemies. It's not premeditated murder, it's wartime. The Ten Commandments say, thou shalt not kill. We know that the idea is thou shalt not murder. How do we know that? Because in the same Ten Commandments, it says to remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. Well, what was the punishment in the Old Testament time for people who did not keep the Sabbath day holy? Numbers 15, they stoned him to death. So, in order to uphold one of the points of the Ten Commandments, you actually have to break one of the Ten Commandments. No, they are different. Different circumstances. These are different circumstances. Two spies come into Jericho. She is involved in espionage. They are spies. This is a spy. It's espionage. Now, you can look at 2 Samuel 16 and you can condemn Hushai and know good and well that you're an American citizen who has spies in different places who are not giving their real name. They lie? No, they use an alias. We all know better. right? It's like people start making this stuff and they want to fight about it, and they know good and well that this is not an issue. And can we say this too? What are you fighting about Rahab for? None of y'all are in a circumstance like Rahab or Hushai. And it's like nobody is going to Rahab or Hushai to just defend lying to your neighbor on a regular basis. We all know that in Ephesians chapter 4, we all want to tell the truth with your neighbor. But this is espionage. And you know what? You're going to see it all over again in chapter 17. Here it is. Let's get this tidbit out of the way. Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed by, in however you want to say this, in Rogel, for they might not be seen. Again, these are men involved in spying. They're giving out, they're carrying a report. They're a messenger. For they might not be seen to come into the city. And a wench went and told them, and they went and told King David. Nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom, but they went both of them away quickly and came to a man's house, which had a well in his court, whither they went down. And the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth, and spread ground corn thereon, and the thing was not known. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman to the house, they said, Where is Ahimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said to them, They be gone over the brook of water, knowing good and well she had hid them in the well. And so it's points like this where we have to just say, you know, even if you disagree with me right now, I sure hope you don't practice what you preach. Man alive. You got an enemy of the state, Absalom, who is a terrorist, has actually taken over the government, and he sends out these unjust servants to seek out the righteous, and you think that you have to tell, they're over there, they're in the well. We all know you wouldn't do that. So why do you spend so much time with Rahab? And I said a moment ago, probably most people don't even know that Hushai is in the Bible, or Ahimaaz and Jonathan in 2 Samuel 17. It's a tidbit. It's not lying, it's espionage. You say, I don't like that, Caleb. I don't like when you say it's not lying, it's espionage. You like it because you say that murder is not wartime. Wartime's not murder. And executing capital punishment is not murder. So I know that you like it. You just haven't come around to it yet. But we'll get there. It's all over the Old Testament, so we're going to have to get there. Now, that's a tidbit. Let's leave that one. This is what we said last time. The book on reading well by Karen Pryor. She's not a Christian. She's associated with the Southern Baptist Convention. I think when she wrote that book, she was affiliated with Liberty University, but I think that she left Liberty University. She left Liberty University. And so she goes through classic literature, and she just makes application through the classic literature. And one of the things that she said was perfectionism is the foil of prudence. And the point she was making was the idea of if you are waiting till you can get so good that you play an absolutely perfect game of chess, meaning you don't lose any pieces, you'll never play chess. So I have to take a moment because I use this illustration about chess, and somebody said to me one day, I don't even get what you're talking about when you're talking about playing chess. Chess is a board game that is not like checkers. Checkers is I can only move one way, diagonal straight across the board. Chess has multiple pieces that can move multiple ways, and you are required to play this game. You are required to think 3 and 4 moves ahead about what you're going to do. You have to watch your pieces and you watch their pieces, because if I move over here, they might move over here and then move this piece over here that distracts me, so they're setting up to take my other pieces. It's not rocket science, but it does require thinking ahead. And this is what we said last time. Everybody's playing. Not everybody's playing well. You might say, well, I don't want to play the game. Look, you are in it. What are we talking about? We're talking about religious politics. And I am not talking about in the United States government. I am talking about the politics that get put into the Lord's church by well-known preachers of the Brotherhood. People have their agendas, and you will get swept up in somebody's agenda, and you may not recognize it, but here's what I'm doing today. I'm trying to tell you that there are other options aside from Brotherhood politics. You see this, we're about to see this, with David, Joab, and Absalom. And so I think some people might say to me, they would say, well, Caleb, you ought not talk about this stuff out in the open. Why? So that young guys can keep getting messed up in it, burn out in it, and quit on religion altogether? I would like to know what you're doing for these people to help basically get them through it. You're just participating in it, probably is why you don't want me to talk about it. It's awful. Luke 16:8, look at what he said. The children of the world, of this world, are wiser in their generation, wiser than the children of light. There's nothing wrong with you being prudent. There's nothing wrong with you being shrewd, right? In 2 Corinthians, Paul says that he himself was crafty. He said, being crafty, I caught you. So you look at all these pieces in your Old Testament text, and it helps you move in and out of the church. Now, I'm saying that to say it helps you rescue people from church politics. Look at this. Moreover, Ahithophel said unto Absalom, let me now choose out 12,000 men. I will arise and pursue after David this night, and I will come upon him while he is weary and weak-handed, and will make him afraid, and all the people that are with him shall flee. And I will smite the king only, and I will bring back all the people unto thee. The man whom thou seekest is as if all returned. So all the people shall be in peace. And the saying pleased Absalom well, and the elders of Israel. Now let's make a point about church politics really quick. This is a note for your notes. Ahithophel says, he says, I can get David. I can beat David. He says, and I'll do it with 12,000 men. That's 4 times what King Saul took out to fight David in 1 Samuel 26:2. Saul was chasing David with 3,000 men across the countryside. Ahithophel says, we'll do it with 12,000. But here's my point. Ahithophel abandoned David. Absalom is a terrorist, treasonous individual inside of Israel. But as you see highlighted at the bottom, the saying pleased Absalom well, and all the elders of Israel. What do you think about that? You say, well, Caleb, like you said a while ago, that hurts. Your son is against you, your former counselor is against you, and then you find out all the people who are held up in Israel, they are actually pleased at the idea of you being hunted down and killed. And here's my point about this. You can be a man without a country and still be on God's side. I'm not in anybody's party. I don't want to be in anybody's party because I'm trying. When you start getting in people's parties is when your hands start getting tied. And you have to start defending the other party members. And I don't care about that. David is not looking at, okay, Absalom, Ahithophel, and the elders of Israel. He's looking at the people of Israel who are being abused while these people are self-fulfilling. You know this is all about Absalom, and this is all about Ahithophel being opportunistic, and he just goes over to be with Absalom. You know, it kind of looks like Absalom's going to outdo David on this one. I'm going on to greener pastures. I'll see y'all later. And the elders of Israel, they just go with it. So here's my point. It's really not a note. It's not a note either way, is it? It doesn't mean anything for outsiders looking in to say to David, you know, David, Absalom is against you, Ahithophel turned on you, and you know, they got this plan going on, and all the elders of Israel, they said they were for that. I just kind of think that maybe you need to rethink where you are. I don't have to rethink where I am because everybody else is against me. What difference does that make? And you know that is true. I don't have to say, well, you're a man without a country, you must be doing something wrong. Well, what if everybody was on my side? The people who disagree with me would say, well, the numbers don't mean anything. Those are just a whole bunch of people deceived by Caleb. Stop making points on stuff that don't matter. I don't care about who's on whose lectureship. Your lectureships are not doing anything. Did lectureships used to be good? Some of them still used to be bad. In the 80s and the 90s, we still had worthless lectureships. But you get the same guys on all these lectures talking to the same people, and you're not doing evangelism. So it doesn't mean anything. You're talking to somebody and say, well, that dude, he's climbing the ladder to nowhere. You say David's a man without a country. You keep trying to climb their ladder, you're going to get exhausted, you're going to get burnt out, you're going to get frustrated, and at some point you're going to say, you know, I think being a man without a country is starting to look good. It's pretty good. You don't have to be up in their nonsense. They get involved in all type of foolishness. You get to tell them, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. No, thank you. And you're trying to do God's work. This is all in the text. I don't know what else you would do with it. You might say, okay, we don't like when you talk about church politics. I don't know what else you would do with David, Joab, and Absalom, and Ahithophel. Can I take a moment? Look, Ahithophel says, I'll go out, I'll get David. He says, I'll take 12,000 men, I'll go get David. Well, I'm going to show you something before I show you what Hushai says back to Ahithophel. We need more people that are willing to simply make a statement, that's not good enough. So, you read information, for instance, right? Somebody thinks I'm just trying to be ugly and trying to pick on people, and I'm just saying it's not good enough. People have asked me, would you be willing to pass out house to house, heart to heart? No, it's not good enough. Do I have anything personally against Alan Webster? No. And really, honestly, I don't know too much about Alan Webster, but my dad has complimented Alan Webster. I'm saying to me, he has said from what he knows of Alan Webster from back in the day, he's complimentary of Alan Webster. I just don't think that the paper is good enough to pass out to lost people. To quote a brother from Washington, it doesn't have enough tooth. It won't hook anybody. That's my take on it. And people shouldn't get so bent out of shape when they hear that. What's wrong with somebody challenging you to do better? Now you might say, that's your opinion. Okay, that's fine. But I'm saying when you start looking inside the New Testament text, the apostles certainly weren't hiding it. And the apostles weren't taking like over 14 weeks to get people ready to go out and not do anything. That's fishers of men. No, fishers of men is not good enough. It should not take you that long. Is it 14 weeks to get ready to go door knock? And the majority of the time, they don't even go door knocking when the program is done. Now, here's an example. You need to be a Bible student. You need to be a history student, okay? Years ago, there was a man named, let's see if I can swivel. Years ago, there was a man named John Allen Chalk. And he was a host for the Herald of Truth radio program. This is years ago. And so while he's doing Herald of Truth, behind the scenes, he sends a letter out to a man named Leroy Garrett. John Allen Chalk is doing Herald of Truth radio broadcast. He sends a letter out to Leroy Garrett, who edits a paper called Restoration Review. It was a monthly. Every month he'd send out 20 pages. And he says to Leroy, I'd like to submit something for your paper. This is their correspondence. Leroy Garrett says back to John Allen Chalk, he says, Brother Chalk, this is December 30th, 1960. He says, I like the idea of using something from you in the review, but the sermon on unity that you sent me is not along the lines that I plan to develop in the immediate future. 2, I think your infallible road to unity outlined under several points on page 6 leaves the basic problem unanswered. Some would say that when you argue that unity comes by accepting Christ's body as the only church and by having biblical officers, that you are begging the question. Surely there would be unity if everyone interpreted the New Testament as those of us in the Church of Christ do. Since this is not the case, what are we to do about our divisions? Down here at the bottom. He says, I think you make some important comments in the early pages of your paper, and then I have highlighted. Leroy Garrett says to John Allen Chalk, while you are more liberal in your approach on unity than most in the Church of Christ, I think you are going to have to provide for more diversity of belief and practice if you have a workable plan. What is my point? My point is that one liberal talking to another liberal says, what you submitted to me is not liberal enough for my paper. Now, why in the world, in the conservative crowd, conservatives hate on liberals, but these people are willing to at least be honest with each other, and that's what I don't understand. Man, conservatives just let garbage come through the line, and they just shuck it out to the people. So, obviously, there's a host of things that I don't agree with Leroy Garrett on, but I do read his material, and there's an element about him that I think is different than most conservatives. I think that from his position, he genuinely wanted to effect change, and I think that a lot of the conservative Brotherhood politicians have no concern about change whatsoever. They are just concerned about keeping their status quo so they can keep their garbage baby food on air. What can I say? Look, here's my biblical precedent. We'll have to go backwards. I'm good. I'm just looking over my slides. I got my producer paying attention to me. Thank you. I just have to look for my slides. Look at 2 Samuel 17. Look at what he says. Verse number 5. Absalom says, "Call now Hushai the Archite, and let us hear likewise what he says. And when Hushai was come to Absalom, Absalom spake unto him, saying, Ahithophel has spoken after this manner. What shall we do after his saying? If not, speak thou." Look at what he does. Hushai said unto Absalom, "The counsel that Ahithophel has given, good." We say things like your friends will tell you this isn't good. So here's an example. I don't know what he was thinking at the moment. I handed my dad the newspaper yesterday, and he starts reading it. And at some point, like, it's only 500 words. And so at some point, I recognize something is wrong because it's taken him so long. And I said, "What are you doing?" And then he said, "When am I going to get to the section?" Because he knew what the article was about. He said, "When am I going to get to where you actually start on this stuff?" And I see his eyes on the paper. And I said, "I'm down here. This is me." I said, "You're not even reading me." And then he finally goes, "Good, I thought you were losing your mind." The other stuff, I don't even know what the other part was, but he said, "Man," he said, "I couldn't believe you were saying that stuff." I hope he would have said it to me. When he got done, I hope he would have said, this isn't good. He's told me before, and I your friends do that. I had a sermon once, a friend of mine, we were in school together, and I asked him, when I got done, I said, "How was that?" And he told me exactly. He said, "When you got to this point in your lesson," he said, "it went downhill." Thank you. I didn't get mad at him. We stayed friends that's not why we stopped being friends. I still count him as my friend, whether he does or not. But I didn't get mad about that. Thank you. It's not a problem for you to tell me it could have been better. And someone says, sometimes people are just being unnecessary and they say, "Well, it could have been better." Well, anything can always be better. But in the moment, was it good? And sometimes we're going to have to say, it's not good enough. And here's what I'm saying. I don't know why one liberal can say to another liberal, it's not liberal enough. And, I've got more correspondence where he just says, "Okay, I'll try again later." I don't know why people are not willing to have that. And our next point is, folks want to have David's reputation, but they don't want to have David's work ethic. And to have a work ethic is going to basically be involving people telling you you're not doing it correctly, or possibly even you're doing a bad job. Okay, you're on What Does the Bible Say?
You wanting the Bible thing?
Are you trying to... This is a live Bible television broadcast that you have called into.
Okay. I just wanted to marry the man that's on television.
Okay, well, I'm a married man, though, so... You have a Bible question?
No.
Okay, all right, you have a good day. Well, I'm married, but maybe thanks anyway. So when you look at this, here's what we're saying. Folks want David's reputation without David's work ethic. So when Ahithophel says, I'll go out and I'll get David, I'll chase David down, and here is what I believe could possibly be, without underestimating your opponent, where David is able to say, "Look, we've already been running from Saul for years. We can do this." And that is what Romans 5 says. And here's what problem for my brethren. They don't work Therefore, they don't get any experience. And when, you're doing nothing, but I'm saying you can make a mess out of nothing, and then they don't have anything to fall back on. Not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulations work patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. And hope maketh not ashamed, because of the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Ghost, which is given unto us. David is able to say, we've done this before, we will make it out of this, and David says, with God's help. Now, this is why I say, I don't know what that means. If you're going to text me something that makes... Okay. Okay, that's fine. So, when I talk to young guys, look at this, about experience. So much people look at it and they say, I don't want to work that hard. You are hurting yourself in the long run, okay? So, this is what I'm saying. I'm not having a moment where I'm bragging. I'm having a moment where I'm saying this is good for me and it's benefiting me. If it's helpful to other people, fantastic, but it's benefiting me. So, I can't remember the exact quote. They put it in a much better way. Francis Bacon said, reading makes a man fool, writing makes him exact. And then somebody else recently that I read, they said, writing helps you think. And it's generating thought. And if you're really concerned with communication, hopefully you get better at it. So here's what I'm saying. Young guys, man, why are you not writing? I write a bulletin for the brethren every week. And not just that, I write a whole separate bulletin that we use for our door knocking. So I'm writing 2. That's like 4 pages. Let's go ahead and call it 4 pages. 4 pages a week, plus a newspaper article every week. And I also submit to other newspapers aside from the Martinsville Bulletin. Why? I want to do my part to make some change around here. That's why I wrote for the Martinsville Bulletin about censorship in the school system. No, I don't think it's a good idea. I've got hopefully another one that's going to come out in a whole other newspaper about Republicans. Want some Republican out in some big convention somewhere in another state. They said we need to have one church for the nation under God. And it's like, we had a state church in Anglicanism and it wasn't good. So you have to make your thoughts be able to communicate to the people. And you're hoping not just to tell somebody off. I say I'm not in the condemning business. I'm in the convincing business. So here's my thing though. This is good for me because it's making me do mental exercise. It is work. Yes, it is work. But there are people out there that they're like, I'd like to do a better job. Then you're going to have to start working. And it's going to mean, what does that mean? It translates out to maybe you're not going to get to go shooting your gun as much. Maybe you're not going to go camping as much and all the recreational activity that you get to do. But you know what? You can make a contribution to mankind. And if you say, well, contribution to mankind, then maybe you should stop taking the church's salary for you to do nothing. This is in your text. Ahithophel says we're going to go out, we're going to chase David down. Hushai says, that's a bad idea, and sometimes you need to hear that's a bad idea. And David, because of his work ethic, is able to make where I say, you're listening, and I just said to guys who are on a full-time salary, you're listening to this Bible class and you're saying, but Caleb, I'm not on a full-time salary. You can still do work. Look, I don't care. I'm not asking them to one way or another. When I get done with an article in the Martinsville Bulletin, look at what they say. Can you see that? Look what they say. The writer lives in Martinsville. So, if it weren't for what does the Bible say, and the fact that they know I'm an evangelist from what does the Bible say, this article wouldn't even say anything like that. So what? You don't preach in the pulpit on Sunday. You can try to write for the newspaper. And you know what? They turn you down. Maybe your writing is not up to par yet, so keep practicing. And you know how you practice? The way that you practice to basically, I'm saying if you want to get good enough for the paper, you practice by writing a church bulletin. And you practice by writing the material that gets passed out to lost people. It's work. And somebody's got to do it, and you don't have to be taking a full-time salary and be in the pulpit every Sunday to help in the work. Look at this. Someone says, I'm not the preacher, I'm just a pawn. I wish that you would stop referring to yourself that way. I'm telling you, I graduated preaching school with a handful of guys. You're going to know as much as they do. And that's not even necessarily a knock to the schools. You know, sometimes I say I don't support the schools. That's not a knock to the schools. It's just the idea that these guys didn't apply themselves. So you're saying, I'm not the preacher, I'm just a pawn. They're a pawn. They just get paid because they didn't apply themselves. But you do have a role to play. So let's look at this text. We saw this a moment ago. Hushai tells Ahithophel, the plan is not good, not gonna work. Well, when he does his job as a spy, he then has to send out information back to David. Hushai said unto Zadok and Abiathar the priests, Thus and thus did Ahithophel counsel Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus have I counseled. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, Lodge not this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily pass over, lest the king be swallowed up and all the people that are with him. Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed, for they might not be seen to come into the city. But look at this. And a wench went out and told them, and they went and told King David. Never and told Absalom. But they went both of them away quickly and came to a man's house, which had a well in his court, whither they went down. Do you see my point here? Zadok and Abiathar, Jonathan and Ahimaaz. We know their names. We don't know these people's names, but are they playing roles? Yes, they're playing roles. She's delivering information, and a wench. But she is functioning in the machine. And we need her to get this done. And then out of nowhere comes a lad. And this unnamed lad goes and tells Absalom, foils the plan. Almost. And then for your notes, Acts 23:16, Saul's or Paul's sister's son, we don't know his name, but Saul's nephew comes in and saves the day. Just in a moment, being in the right place at the right time and being willing to put yourself in the mix. Somebody says, no, don't involve me. Worthless. You're not helping. You know it too. Like, I'm not telling you anything you didn't know. If you're going to be one of these people who says, don't put me in it, yeah, to the cause, worthless. These people are going out on limbs for the cause. So, here's what I'm saying, y'all. You're dealing with somebody, Absalom, who was going against his own dad and had his own brother assassinated. You think he won't kill these people? And at the same time, you're going against Joab and, I can never remember the other brother's name, Abishai. You're going against Joab and Abishai. You know, they will kill this boy, a lad. You think they have a problem killing him to keep messages in wartime from being delivered? We all know that opposing sides will capture, what are they called? Couriers. And they will execute your courier. Don't call yourself a pawn. You are very important to this whole scheme that is going on. We have a battle going on between good and evil. You are important, and I would say probably you just don't recognize your potential. Excuse me. So, when I talk about, you say, well, you know, I'm not the preacher. I have other books, I'm just not there yet. I have these other books here with me. And if you will read the histories, well, that's what I was afraid of. You will read the histories again. You've seen this book before, but this is Contending for the Faith by Ira Rice. This is a historical course because he has all the personalities and the things that they were involved in and the people who were defending them and the people who were opposing them. And you know who will be in here? There will be a lot of people who don't preach on Sunday, but they are concerned and they are a part of the cause and they want to be involved. There's going to be a man out on the coast, West Coast, and he gets a lot done. And you know, he worked at DuPont. He wasn't like a fixed preacher every Sunday, but he was basically somebody who said, I've got this job and it pays my bills, but I also have pursuits that I would like to accomplish for the Lord's church, and he got a lot done. So stop selling yourself short. Stop saying, I can't do this, I can't do that. You keep telling yourself that enough and you just won't. I can't is I won't. Now, I do have to say this, though. As you start prepping yourself to become more involved, you need to be ready to go 15 rounds. Do you know what that means? Boxers, they go 15 rounds. That's the whole match. I know that everybody has the idea, like, no, I want to knock it out in the first, second round. Being realistic, you need to be ready to go 15 rounds. And so one thing about that is, I'm just really worried about this, so I'm just going to go ahead and move it. Because I got all these books and my laptop. So, one thing that I have learned as I have studied through these books, here's another one. So, this is a paper that's bound up in a hardback. It's the 1970 edition of Firm Foundation. If you can get your hands on stuff like this, you need to get it. Firm Foundation, 1970. Contending for the Faith, 1970. This is Restoration Review, 1977. And you're looking at this stuff and you're seeing people's playbook is what you're doing. And one of the things that I have noticed about liberals who wanted to affect change, they were willing to go 15 rounds. They were hanging in. They were playing what's called long ball. And I'm saying conservatives I have to tell you, I think that more times than not, conservatives are trying to impress other conservatives, and they get burnt out. Whereas I do think that the liberals are trying to change things. That's not saying that I agree with the changes they're trying to make necessarily, but I think that they're more dedicated to their ideas. And I say this because when David is trying to protect the people in Israel, David does want to do a good job. David arose and all the people that were with him, and they passed over the Jordan. So you get your Bible map out. Jerusalem is down in the south, and they're going to go up and over. This is a lot of traveling. They pass over Jordan. And my point down at the bottom is, we won't put up with the most minor inconveniences, even if it means keeping the church together and then getting the gospel out. Well, if this is like, okay, I like the idea, but if I'm going to have to be going through all this, then no, I don't want any part of it. And so we've said before, people who watch this broadcast know that my dad keeps a lawyer on retainer and has a good relationship with his lawyer. I don't understand why y'all's preachers out there don't have lawyers. Well, why would we need one? Because sectarian people coming up with trumped up charges against you, like when you come to a public question and answer seminar at the Baptist church and then they try to hit you for trespassing at an advertised public event? Yes. You need to be getting a lawyer. You ought to be stirring up your town, getting people to think, getting people to have conversation, getting people angry enough to where they actually pull their Bible out so that they try to prove you wrong. This is in your text. David is willing to put up with inconveniences. You need to be putting up with inconveniences. Now, let me say this too. Some stuff you don't have to put up with. And I'm talking about people's attitudes. Somebody come up and say, let me tell you something. You don't have to take that. Leave the conversation. Walk away. Give them a scripture. No, I'm not going to Ephesians 4 sit here and listen to you clamor. You don't treat anybody else this way, but for some reason you think that the preacher just has to lay down and take it. No, thank you. You know what? I hang up on folk. I don't have to take that nonsense. You're not going to be civilized and let me talk with you? And I had conversation with some people recently, And I told them, I said, I said, I do have things to do, right? And they said, yeah, I know you're busy. And I said, well, I've reached the point in this phone call where I'm finished. And I said, but I don't want to hang up on you. So I said, I'm telling you bye. And they just kept on talking. I said, I wish you'd tell me bye. And then they just kept on talking. I said, okay, bye-bye now. And I hung up on them. You don't do anybody else that way. You're not going to do me that way. And what's wrong? If it's like I'm saying, I'm willing to let you come into my day, and I'm willing for you to take up a big chunk of time if you will be civil. And so the other thing is, let's get some, and I'm saying mutual respect going on. I don't have an intention. I don't want to treat you like, I don't want you to be on the other side of the phone thinking, so let's talk about this. I don't want you to be on the other side of the phone saying, Caleb just thinks I'm an idiot. So here's what I do. I cut right to the chase, and I assume that you know exactly what I'm talking about. But then when I do that, they say, that's abrasive. You can't do anything right? So here's what I'm saying. I'm not going to treat you like an idiot, so why are you treating me like one? I get a lot of people, they're talking to me like I'm a 4-year-old. And I say to them, what are you getting to? What's the point? Because I know what you're saying. Just talk to me like I'm an adult. I'll talk to you like you're an adult. We be kind to each other. I'm willing to have these conversations. But I'm saying that to people of letting like elders' wives just wear you down. She doesn't hold office just because she's the elder's wife. She doesn't have any authority to be talking to the congregation the way that she sometimes does. So don't let that stuff bother you. But in the meantime, you do need to have the idea, though, some of these things are inconveniences that I'm willing to suffer through to accomplish the greater goal. David's doing it. We can do it too. And here's a moment, though, we said earlier, David appears to be a man without a country. No, David is not the person without a country in this scenario. Ahithophel is. All the elders of Israel were against David, but you have to notice this. Hushai says, Ahithophel's counsel's not good. And what does Ahithophel do? When Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his ass, arose, gat him home to his house, to his city, put his household in order, and he hanged himself, and he died, and was buried in the sepulchre of his father. Man, you get told no, and you go out and kill yourself. That's a man without a country. You have gone on to greener pastures, and now you're being rejected. Okay, so here's a point too. We get people, like I said, some things you don't have to put up with, right? We had, years ago, an elder said to my dad about some of our evangelistic tactics. And he said to my dad, basically giving an excuse, not really condemning my dad, but the elder was excusing himself and the congregation where he was for basically being inactive, stagnant. He said, Johnny, some of the things that y'all do are actionable. And what he meant by that was like actionable against the law. And the response is, that's why we have a lawyer. Do what you need to do, and for people who will abuse the government system, and that's exactly what they do, they abuse the deputies, they abuse the court system, and you have a lawyer on retainer, and y'all win. And you're getting to do your job. Now, go back over here. Here's why I say politics, any of them. I'm not, and I'm saying y'all, conservatives are just as vicious and liberals are just as vicious as conservatives. That's why I don't want to be in anybody's party, because when you start kicking their sacred cow, well, now you're out of the party. Well, maybe it's a good idea I didn't get in y'all's party to begin with. Ahithophel saw that he was being told, we're not going with yours, Ahithophel, and he goes home and he hangs himself. Matthew 11:7, what did you go out to see? A reed shaking in the wind? I say this. You're a person who just goes where the wind blows, right? You're going with the tide. You deserve it. Absolutely, you deserve it. Now, I can say that at the same time that I'm trying to give you a protective statement to say, don't get involved in it in the first place. But if you're going to be one of these people, and you know good and well, people know when they're practicing politics. They know what their goals are, and they view people as stepping stones to get to their goals. And when those stepping stones get yanked out from under your feet and you fall, you deserve that because you were playing the game. So what's the answer? You can be a man without a country, and you can be with God. You can do God's work, and you won't have to play that nonsense. And you know what the thing about this is? Ahithophel, who sided against David, I'm very confident that if he had just come back to David, David probably would have taken him back in. He took Abner back in. He never dealt unkindly with Saul. He had good favor with Jonathan. That's the type of person David was. And it's like, but here's my thing. When you are this type of person like Ahithophel, you can't imagine that David would be that good. Why? Because you're not that good. We judge other people. Basically, it's called projection. We project our bad qualities onto other people, and we basically say, I wouldn't do it, so why would David? Because David is a better person than Ahithophel is. And we're seeing David make mistakes. That's not why David is a better person, because he never makes mistakes. It's because, I don't know why I'm wheezing. It's not that David doesn't make mistakes. It's that David continuously gives people second chances, which they need. People need second chances. Now, Ahithophel is the man without a country. Now, let's look at this. This is where I say classic literature. Remember this? In 2 Samuel 12:11, it's told, David is going to have these problems. This is after the whole Uriah and Bathsheba. And he says, someone of your own house is going to rise against you. He shall lie with thy wives in the sight of this son. 2 Samuel 15:6, the king went forth and all his household after him, and he left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep in the house. And Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into thy father's concubines, which he had left to keep the house, and all the Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father, and then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. So you get this tiny moment with not much explanation, 2 Samuel 12:11. It just offhandedly gets mentioned again in 2 Samuel 15:16, and then in 2 Samuel 16:21, it comes to light that it's going to be used against David. And I say that this is what makes the Bible classic literature, is because it does have these moments that good writing is found in other books. You read other books and you say, oh, they mentioned that how many pages ago with no type of reference, and now it's showing up, and oh, it's in the story. I get it. The Bible is filled with stuff like that. And the Bible, as you go along, introduces new characters. Now, when we read the Bible, we say, great, one more person to keep up with. I get it. It's difficult. I have a hard time keeping up with the fact that Abner is Saul's uncle, but David is the uncle, because Saul was the king and Abner was the captain. So Saul is the uncle, Abner is the captain. But when you get over to David, he's the king. And I reverse that, right? See, that's what I'm saying. Saul is the nephew, he's the king. Abner is the captain, he's the uncle. But David is the king and he's the uncle. And Abishai, Joab are the nephews, and they're the captains. Absalom. See, I got you good and confused, and now you're going to go back inside of your text, and I'm going to show you a Chronicles passage in a moment to get all of it straight. But here's my thing. As you're going along in a book and you introduce a new character and you don't know them, and you wonder how this is going to turn out, what are they going to add to the story? Are they going to be a good guy? Are they going to be a bad guy? And maybe you're not reading books to appreciate literature that way, but I'm saying when you watch TV shows, people who watch TV shows, they start talking about, oh, the new character who came in, blah, 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 blah. You do need to develop some respect for the Bible and the fact that it's classic literature. And I'm saying that's going to help us talk to people about what they say, well, I read the Bible and I just don't really get too much out of it. That's when I have to ask the person, tell me some of the other books that you read. You don't like reading the Bible, I hear you, but what are some of the other books that you read? And then they're probably more times than not going to say, man, I hadn't read a book since high school. That's your problem. It's not the Bible. It's that people are not actual readers to be able to see this stuff. So, you introduce a new character, and Absalom made Amasa captain of the host instead of Joab. So this is where I have to go back to Brotherhood politics, because that's the application of this text. I don't know what else you would do with it. So, this is where the conspiracy is still going on, right? They said previously to David, the conspiracy is strong. Well, now people see Amasa come in, and he is made captain of the host instead of Joab, and somebody says, oh man, new blood, we're going to build up the army. And so, this is how, I'm saying national politics, this is how politicians treat young people. You got to have the young people because they got the energy and they got the blah, blah, blah. Politicians use young people every 4 years in November, then they dump them. And young people need to wake up to that. But that's what Absalom is doing. We're getting in new blood. We're going to build up the army, and they're trying to legitimize their rebellion. We have a king, we have a counselor, and now we have a captain. So, here is my statement. Are you ready for this? I have shown you contending for the faith, the firm foundation, restoration review, all these people, and I'm saying y'all, people working with other people. Look at this. Young guys, I am trying to encourage you to be more focused on local work rather than brotherhood politics. So do you ever think about the idea, like let's say it this way, your goal, in your mind, you're young and you say your goal is to be invited to teach at a preaching school. Do you not think that it's possible that you're going to get in there and maybe at first it's neat and you enjoy getting to be in the preaching school, but then very quickly, how long do you think it becomes for teachers to become disillusioned at the fact that they keep getting subpar students? We had a lot of guys in school who were not there because they wanted to be. We had a handful of guys where the congregation sent them there hoping to straighten them out. They did not want to come. They were getting into trouble back home, and the congregation sent them hoping to get them straightened out. Somebody else, other people were there because family members talked them into going and whatnot, and they weren't reading outside of class. I'm going to tell you, some classes weren't worth paying attention to. Barry Grider didn't teach us. He just talked Alabama football. But my thing is, you're putting so much into that idea. You want to be invited to teach at a preaching school, and then you get there and it's not what you thought it was. Well, now you're in. And then you're going to start thinking about, how can I get out of here? Possibly. So here's what I would rather encourage you to do. You know that inside of your New Testament text, local evangelism is always there. Whether it's Samaria, Antioch, Thessalonica, Galatia, Ephesus, Corinth, local evangelism is there. So what am I saying? I'm not saying it's going to be easy and that it won't have like its bad days and whatnot, but you know that you won't be going wrong if you're trying to do local evangelism. So here's my point. When you're a young guy and you are doing a good job and you start getting invitations, I believe that point number one is the truth. When you're a young man and you're doing a good job and somebody invites you into their circle, they are not setting you up to excel. They are setting you up to propel their agenda. When I went to the second school that I went to, I love those people. I'm just telling you how it is and how it went. When I first got there, one of the teachers said to me, I was in my second year. When I got there, one of the teachers said to me, "You are going to be good for the school." That's nice. It's a compliment. That's not necessarily why I'm here. He said, "You're going to be good for the school." But as I was starting to have issues with Wesley Simons, the director, which we were having multiple things. He didn't want me to go record people in the sectarian groups. He asked me to take their information off my flyers. I did that part. I took their information off, but I said, I'm not going to stop recording these people. And there were a handful of other things. And as I was on my way out, Wesley Simons said to me, "Caleb, we could have made you great." So when I'm coming into the school, a teacher tells me, "You're going to help the school." And as I'm going away from the school, the director says back to me, "We could have made you great." And so that's where I say, it's not so much about you excelling as an individual, but rather what you can do for their agenda. I love Wesley Simons. I don't think that he's directing the school anymore, and so I've told people, if Wesley's out of the picture, I for sure wouldn't send you over there. I've already said before, I don't support any of the schools. If you were just saying, but I'm going to one, then you would have gotten the best education, textually speaking, I think, from Wesley Simons. But that's how the brotherhood politics go. And so down here, the second point, while you're being praised for a good job, the praises are contingent on your relation to their institution. The moment you become a liability, they will cut you loose. And so, really, that's why we don't like the idea of laying hands on anybody. We have reached out and we have touched you. I don't want it to have to be a thing. My dad doesn't want it to be a thing of like where you start going in the direction we don't want to go there and it go with you and it becomes like this big public spectacle. Oh, they had a whole thing. No. Why do we need that? You don't need us. We don't need you. We like the idea that we're trying to do all the Lord's work together. But I don't like how it ends up everybody gets in bed together and then they all start fighting about it. And here's my proof. Like, don't let me be proof and somebody says, well, Caleb, you just had a bad taste in your mouth. I said I love Wesley, and I have told people to this day he was the best Bible teacher that I had while I went to school. Love him. Loved his wife, Elva. Just how things go sometimes. But here is more proof, I'm saying outside of myself, that the Brotherhood will use you and they will dump you. You're ordering books for Christmas. This is the Deaver-Lockwood debate. I think that Bill Lockwood did the best job of all the people who have debated Mac. He's young, right? This is in like 1998. He's young. And before this debate happened, Steve Wiggins helped Bill do the debating. He was the moderator. And it was said, Lockwood and Wiggins are the rising stars of the Brotherhood. They're two young men. They're doing a good job. But then this happened. Mac Deaver starts having statements of direct operation of the Holy Spirit appear in all these different writings. And Steve and Bill end up being the individuals who debate Mac Deaver. Mac Deaver, by 1998, had been involved in very, very much for a number of years. And not only that, his father, Roy Deaver, had been in long before him. And sometimes the term that is used for Mac is he was the darling. He was everybody's darling. And so before Bill debated Mac Deaver, it was said of him, Bill Lockwood is one of the rising stars of the Brotherhood. And when Bill challenged Mac Deaver to debate, people who actually agreed with Bill and they disagreed with Mac, they were saying to Bill, who do you think you are debating Mac Deaver? This is why I'm saying, do local work. Do evangelism, lost souls, rescue them from eternal hell rather than climb the political brotherhood ladder because they will dump you. They will kick you off the ladder mid-climb. You want to get to the top. Where do you go when you get to the top? You have one place to go, down. And then when you get to the top, what do you have to do? You have to fight everybody else who's trying to come to the top. And that is Galatians 5:15, biting and devouring each other. They will use you. Stories of these individuals who have been used and they have been dumped. And someone might say, well, Bill got himself into trouble. Well, Mac got himself into trouble. People behind the scenes were telling Mac, why are you pressing this on us? Just leave it alone. And he just dug in. And his position was ever changing. From the Deaver-Fox debate up until all the Ben Vick debates, and later on, his position has ever been changing. So that's what I've said before. It doesn't really matter when someone says, well, they did it to themselves. I think people who play the game do it to themselves. It's just a matter of time. They're all kicking somebody out and writing somebody up, and that's why I don't like it. And it's Galatians 5:15. I love these people. I do. I very, very much love these people. My dad knew Mac Deaver years ago and has always spoke affectionately of Mac Deaver. While he does not agree with him, he speaks affectionately of him. And he was very close friends with Bill Lockwood, speaks affectionately of him. And so to say a word to my fellow young men, I am 28 years old and I'm speaking to fellow young men, that my encouragement to you would to not be in the political sphere and not to try to climb the ladder, but to help people in your local area, which means what? Try to get on local television and be live and field phone calls. Try to get in the local newspaper. Try to work up a group that can have regular door knocking. When I see house to house, heart to heart, people talk about our annual day of door knocking. That is an absolute joke. One day out of 365, we're going door knocking. I love y'all, and I just don't want to see young guys get burnt out and give up. Here's what you do. You replace the politics with evangelism, which was what I said. Mark 1:38, Jesus said, I need to go out into the other towns, that I may preach there also. Local evangelism. And then Hebrews 13:13, let us go forth, therefore, unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. we should stop focusing so much on the inside of the body and start trying to extend outside. Someone heard me say that, say, you don't want to educate the body? Yeah, I wish elders were doing their job. I wish elders were educating the body. And I wish that the talented young evangelist men go out and do evangelism. You got it. More and more family problems, man. Let's get off that. Somebody says, okay, Caleb. All right. Well, let's get back to this. Amasa. Why is it so interesting that Amasa comes in? He's not just a new character. Absalom made Amasa captain in the host instead of Joab, which Amasa was a man's son, whose name was Ithra, an Israelite, that went in to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister to Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So Israel and Absalom pitched in the land of Gilead. 2 Samuel 17, 25 and 26. What does that mean? Amasa is Joab's cousin. He is Absalom's cousin. All these people related. When you read your Old Testament text, this is why I don't, like somebody says, they just having a family squabble over there. Your Old Testament is filled with family squabbles. It doesn't mean that it's not legitimate. It doesn't mean that you don't have a place to play in it. Like we said, people earlier said, well, I'm just a pawn, I'm not the preacher. You are valuable to the board. We're making moves and we need you to be in it. Cousin, uncle, nephew. These people are having a war and everybody is in it. Now here's where I say it again. You're not a soldier, but man, you are helping the cause. It came to pass when David was come to this area of the children of Ammon, it says, and make her the son of Amiel. And look at this. Barzillai, we have him highlighted. Barzillai, the Gileadite, brought beds, basins, earthen vessels, wheat, barley, flour, parched corn, beans, lentils, and parched pulse, honey, butter, and sheep, and cheese of kine for David and for the people that were with him to eat. For they said, the people is hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Now down there at the bottom, this is 2 Samuel 17, 27 and 29. But if you go back and you look at 1 Samuel 17, 18, I know that's how I said it when we did 1 Samuel 17. David comes out, the text says he brought 10 different types of cheese, and I know that when you and I were back there in that text, I came back and I said, I brought y'all some cheese. No, you're not fighting, but you are helping the people who are, and that matters. Stop saying, well, I'm not in it. You know what? Some people, they have health difficulties where they can't go door knocking. Do you know what you can do? You can pray for the door knockers. You can pray for the people that the door knockers are going to be talking to. Stop beating yourself up on the fact that you cannot go out. Barzillai is a very old man. Stop beating yourself up on the fact that you cannot go out and start praying fervently for the people who are. That's all manner of this stuff, y'all, I'm saying. You say, well, I can't do what those people do. Support them in the way that you can. Now, let's look at this, y'all. I'm saying all this, church work, the inter-struggle, I'm talking about working together. I have already said, and I still think, I think that Joab is a good man. I think David is a good man. You're going to have to stop doing the stuff where you basically say about some of these men, well, what about when they do this and that? Look, and you're wanting them to be perfect. You're wanting them to be Old Testament Jesus, and that's not who they are. They need Jesus as a Savior just like you do, just like I do. But I'm saying, man, as far as literature goes, I love to read Joab. Amasa is introduced. And it's like, I recognize cousin to cousin is not the relationship of father to son, but man, David is allowing Absalom just to create this mess. And David numbers the people that were with him and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. And David sent forth a third part of the people under the hand of Joab, and a third part under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and a third part under the hand of Ittai of the Gittite. And the king said to the people, I will surely go forth with you myself also. But here's my point. Joab does not appear to hesitate. Yeah, we're going to go out and we are going to kill our own cousin. And I am saying that dude is ice cold, and you are going to have to be that way. And it's like somebody says, that sounds so harsh. You know what you're about. You know the mission statement, and people who deviate from the mission statement, they made that choice. Friend of mine, How about this? How about when I say they're a friend of mine, and then I have to have a moment when myself and I say I count them as a friend whether they do or not. A friend of mine said, let me tell you about why I don't like the statement of throwing people under the bus. He said, you can't throw somebody under the bus. He said, they made a conscious decision to get off the bus that was moving and then get in front of the moving bus. He said they did every bit of it to themselves. I have no problem with Joab not hesitating at all. And that is Matthew 6, verse number 22. Jesus calls us to be single-eyed. I have a mission statement. This is what I want to do with my life. And excuse me if I don't look at all the stuff that you want me to look at while I focus on the mission statement. That's Joab. Who cares? Amasa has decided to be involved in treason. Okay, we will treat him as a treasonous person then. Traitor, that's exactly what he's going to get. Now, here's a quotation from another book. I meant to bring the book with me. I forgot. You can look it up online. It's by a man named David Ed Harrell Jr. I'd like to make I know he's a junior, but some of y'all got these very names. It's like no one else is going to have that name, and you make it difficult for me to remember so that I can tell other people. I always just call him Ed Harrell, which is what other people call him. But on the book, it's got a big old name, and when you Google search it, it's going to have a big name. Ed Harrell has a book called 20th Century Christian, and it is the biography of Homer Haley, but I tell people in reality, it is a biography of Foy Wallace. And in that book, you will find that Foy Wallace made this statement. He said, when it comes to the truth, I have no friends. That's unkind. I wouldn't want to be your friend. Look, man, what's he saying? I got a mission statement, and I don't let my friends deviate me from the mission statement. You think he didn't have friends? Look, you can be a good friend, and you have to tell your friends, no, thank you. Otherwise, you would be letting your friends abuse you, and that's not good friendship. John 2:24, but Jesus did not commit himself unto them because he knew all men. You know, Jesus comes on the scene, and all these folk are like, oh, Jesus, we need you to be king instead of Herod, and we want you to blah, blah, blah. And they're trying to get him to do things outside of his mission statement, and he has to say, no. Well, you know, we thought that we would get to have some say in all this. Sorry, you don't. Take your say and get your own thing going and do it your way. Why? Why is that the way that people are? The people who are not generating anything want to tell you how to do what you're doing. Go do your own thing and do it how you want to do it. But this is the reason why brethren fight. It's because the do-nothings want to tell the do-somethings how to do it. No, thank you. And Foy Wallace said, no, thank you. I read a book the other night. Some woman was writing about Foy Wallace. She said, arrogant. She took up like 3 to 4 paragraphs on that page talking about how arrogant Foy Wallace was. And I sat there thinking, this is mighty pompous. To write about someone being so arrogant? When it comes to the truth, I have no friends. It's 1 Corinthians 16:12. You get to tell your friends no. As touching our brother Apollos, I greatly desired him to come unto you with the brethren, but his will was not at all to come at this. I don't think that that's like anything. I can't come right now. I don't want to come right now. I'm busy doing other things. Someone's going to say, yeah, Paul had apostolic authority. You know, Paul makes several references in 1 and 2 Corinthians where he makes note of himself. I'm not going to abuse my apostolic authority. So, I don't have a problem with Apollos saying, not now. And sometimes you friends tell other friends, not ever, which is Paul to Peter. So you say apostolic authority. Well, Peter's got as much apostolic authority as Paul does, and Paul has to tell Peter, not ever, Peter, in Galatians chapter 2. We're not sectioning ourselves off from Gentiles just because some Jews showed up. Not now, not ever. When you have friends, I think that friends grant freedom to friends, and political partners don't grant freedom to political partners because you always got to pledge allegiance to the party. I'm telling you this stuff because I care about you. Honestly, I do, man. I hear young guys going through it. And I hate it for them, and I pray for them, and I try to reach out, and sometimes it is not at all reciprocated. I try to reach out, send them some books, they don't say anything back, that's okay. if they decide that they're sick of the politics, I'll try to do what I can to help them then. Can I tell you the difference? We're wrapping up. We're running out of time. The difference between a boss and a leader, you want to work with people, and they want to work with you, but they don't want to work for you. And so when you look at 2 Samuel 18, verse number 2, David says, I will surely go forth with you myself also. And I think that that is a consistent marker of David, that he is always in it with the people. So here's something that I do have to say again to the young guys, young evangelists. The membership is not going to do something that you yourself are unwilling to do. So there are preachers out there that from the pulpit, they will just say, we got to do evangelism, but then they never do it. Can I now talk to the people in the pew? You have a responsibility to obey God as far as evangelism. Evangelism is a command. So we all have that command to fulfill regardless of who's doing what. Okay? But we have to make this note there, that there are a lot of guys out there, they're in the pulpit and they shouldn't be, or they ought to repent, and they're just driving the people hard while they themselves are lazy. And I think that as far as the text goes, I'm saying, look, I think that if you will be real, I think the people will be real with you in return. The people answered, thou shalt not go forth, for if we flee away, they will not care for us. Neither if half of us die will they care for us. But now thou art worth 10,000 of us. Therefore now it is better that thou succor us out of the city. And the king said to them, what seems best to you, I'll do. And the king stood by the gate, and the people came out by hundreds and by thousands. I think that if you consistently make your life about taking care of people, they will just want to take care of you. And this is where someone says to me, like, I don't believe that. Luke 14 says, do good to people not respecting anything in return. Amen. Do good to people not respecting anything in return. And we've already made these points about David, that he did a lot. At the beginning of 2 Samuel, we said David does a lot of work just so that he can say back to the people, now, please let me work for you. He wanted to serve the people, and the people took care of him. However good a leader might be, he cannot be perfect, and that is what people expect out of him. It is outlandish. It is unrealistic. We are about to, as we close, have a series of segments where David is just having a bad day. The troops are going out, and David says to the people, y'all take it easy on the terrorists now. The king commanded Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains charge concerning Absalom, and the people went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. Demoralize the troops as they're going out. And so a statement to that is, you have this, and this is why I can't stand negativity in a congregation. It's like, this is something that we have said before. You start hearing some of these people talk about, we've got like 100% conversion rate. Man, y'all knocking it out better than Jesus could. Jesus didn't have a 100% conversion rate. What are you talking about? So you're not going to have a 100% conversion rate, but then people start talking about, well, we probably ain't going to reach these folk. We're going to go out, but we're at least doing our job. No, I'm not just doing my job. I'm going to go interact with God's creation. John 3:16, God loves these people. 2 Timothy 2:25, in the moment they are opposing themselves. That does not mean that they won't come around later. We are expecting people to change overnight, which is ridiculous. We put all this stuff on our own selves. Stop expecting people to change overnight, and you'll have a better attitude about getting to do the Lord's work. I'm not going to go out and do my job. Stop demoralizing the troops. All these people out here saying, well, door knocking don't work. Well, what do y'all do that does work? Tell me. Maybe I'd like to switch over to a more productive product. Nothing? Oh, okay. You just like to complain. Okay. Y'all, when you find text like this, I saw this. Maybe you say you saw it before I did. But I looked at this and I said, man, we don't study. We just regurgitate the same old, same old. We do not realize And I'm saying to see this, I'm not trying to down David, but I'm trying to get all of us to wake up to the fact of what we are willing to put people through. Where the people of Israel were slain, they go out and they have the battle with Absalom and his men. Where the people were slain before the servants of David, there were the great slaughter of the day of 20,000 men. For the battle was there scattered over the face of all the country. So, you look at Joshua 7, only 36 men died, and Joshua rends his clothes. It's a big deal when any number of people die. And in Judges 20, 21, verse 25, verse 35, about 62,000 people died in a 3-day battle. This is a big deal. And we just read over it, boom, you're on to the next thing, instead of realizing that this covered a great portion of the land across the Jordan, a great segment of the land where 20,000 people died. And you basically look at this and say, we came out here and David said, take it easy on the person who was doing all of this. We would not be out here if it were not for Absalom. And David said, take it easy on Absalom. And so this is where we look at 1 Timothy. And, I'm going to do this. Talking about elders. Them, it's elders. Them, pronoun is to the elders. Them that sin, rebuke before all, that others also may fear. I charge thee before God and the Lord Jesus Christ and the elect angels that thou observe these things without preferring one before another, doing nothing by partiality. David is preferring his child before everybody else. He is being partial. He is putting everybody through this. And this is my statement, that we put our brothers and sisters in Christ through turmoil because we are partial to our blood relatives. When you look at 1 Samuel 2, I think it's about verse 17 to 20. Because Eli did not restrain his sons Hophni and Phinehas, it says the people abhorred the offering of God. David's refusal to control his emotions. The man said unto Joab, look, they get Absalom in the woods, okay? Absalom hangs himself up in the trees by his hair. He's riding a mule, he hangs himself up by his hair. And they leave him hanging, right? And he's alive. And the man said to Joab says, when you saw him, did you kill him? And the man said, no. And then the man said to Joab, though I should receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, I would not put my fourth hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged thee and Abishai, saying, beware that none touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise I should have wrought falsehood against my own life, for there is no matter hid from the king, and thou thyself would have set thyself against me. He says, if I had killed Absalom, David would have sent you after me, and you, Joab, would have come and got me. They all know Joab is going to do his job. Then said Joab, I may not tarry thus with thee. And he took 3 darts in his hand, thrust him through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men that bare Joab's armor compassed about and smote Absalom and slew him. 2 Samuel 18, 12 through 15. David's refusal to control his emotions, which Colossians 3:5 calls inordinate affection. Obviously you have affection for your child, but now you're allowing your affection for your child to overreach onto these people to where they can't even do their job. A terrorist, they cannot even execute a terrorist. And the man says, I wouldn't have done it for 1,000 pieces of silver. I wouldn't have done it. Can't even do his job because of David's inordinate affections. I do have to say, members in the congregation, sometimes members in the congregation say, hey, if we could get a preacher who would teach the truth, we'd love it. And I'm telling you right now, the preacher is scared to death to teach the truth because y'all are going to jump on him when he upsets your family members. Well, my aunt came to visit and she didn't like that. And I didn't like it. You liked it. You would have liked it if it was somebody else's aunt in the audience. You wouldn't have cared then. My friends down at Robertson Club, my friends at the bank, my blah, 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 they heard all this and they don't like it. That's why someone says, if we had a preacher who teach the truth, if we had a preacher who had a spine. Some of y'all, his worst enemy. It's not even the sectarians in the community. But this is where David has the people, and this is where people in the pew do the evangelists and possibly the elders. We're all in this is what I'm saying. You're like, man, Caleb, 1 minute you're hitting the evangelists, then you're hitting the elders, then you're hitting people in the pew. You know, all this is me, right? I'm in here with you. All this is for me, and I'm getting to benefit from it, and I'm trying to help people enjoy more than they have been in the past. People are afraid to do a good job, and I say more classic literature. When you see in 2 Samuel 18:9, Absalom rides through the woods, went under the thick boughs of a great oak, and his head got caught hold in the oak, and he was taken up between heaven and earth, and the mule that was under him went away. And then you say, oh man, back in 2 Samuel 14:25 and 26, when it says, Absalom was beautiful, from his head to his foot there was no blemish, and when he polled his head, for it was every year that at the end of the year he polled it, and because his hair was heavy on him, he would poll it, and his hair would weigh 200 shekels after the king's weight. And so you were reading 2 Samuel 14 and say, why are we just getting this random note about this dude's hair and how much hair he's got? Because that's foreshadowing for when you get to 2 Samuel 18:9. Then you say, oh, we had that random note about his hair, and then his hair, his beauty and his beautiful hair are his downfall. Classic literature. It's there. We just don't always appreciate it. Here's the end of Absalom. Undignified burial. Joab does not allow Zadok's son to go tell the news. I really do imagine that's because he thinks that David will kill Zadok's son. And he does say to Zadok's son, when are you going to go tell him you don't know anything? When he does show up, he says, I don't really know what's going on, verse number 29. But then in 1833, David weeps before all of the people. Last 10 minutes, here's our conclusion. You do have to know how to react to victory. Now, someone says they're a sore loser, and then the other person says, well, they are an abysmal winner. Well, you have to celebrate, and you do have to rejoice with those who rejoice. But this is what happens. It was told Joab, behold, the king weeps and mourns for Absalom, and the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all the people. For the people heard that day how the king was grieved for his son, and the people gat them by stealth that day into the city, as people being ashamed steal away when they flee in the battle. But the king covered his face and cried with a loud voice, my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. Joab came into the house of the king and said, you have shamed this day the faces of all thy servants, which this day have saved thy life and the lives of thy sons, thy daughters, and the lives of thy wives and thy concubines, in that you love your enemies and you hate your friends. For thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants, for this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived and we all died, it would have pleased thee well. Now therefore arise, go forth, and speak comfortably unto the servants. For I swear by the Lord, if thou go not forth, there will not tarry one with thee this night, and that will be worse unto thee than all the evil that befell thee from thy youth until now. Now someone says, is Joab threatening David, or is he really saying that people might abandon him? I think that both are appropriate. We all just risked our lives for you, David, and you would have been fine had we all died. You look at something to compare it to, and we all recognize that you can go into the resources of your mind, and if you're old enough, or if you watch documentaries or you read books, everybody says that our vets, when they came home from Vietnam, got a bad shake. They institute a draft, and you're forced to go over there. You do your time, you come home, and the government who sent you over, they're all fighting at home. LBJ called it JFK's war. And so everybody at home's fighting about it, and people say, I'm just doing my job. You were forced into it. You come home, and all these people are against you. That's what David's doing to his people. So if you're someone who's kept up with some of our events in America and you say, yeah, that was an awful time, and the Vietnam vets, they got mistreated, then you basically get an idea of what's going on in 2 Samuel 19. The people are being mistreated. They don't have the affection of their leadership. And he says the victory turned into mourning. Something to compare it to. But when you look at the text, and this is why I say read your Bible, read your Old Testament, these are very gracious people. I'm going to just quickly move through this. Very gracious people. When the battle is done, and David is making a mess, he's behaving poorly, all the people said, you read it, 2 Samuel 19, 9 through 12. They just say, we want to bring the king home. They still love him. Very gracious people. Shimei, the man who had followed along, cursing him all the way, Shimei comes back, and he apologizes to David. Verse number 19, let not my Lord impute iniquity unto me. I went too far. impute iniquity unto me, neither do thou remember that which thy servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart. For thy servant doth know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come the first this day of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? And David said, What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be adversaries unto me? Shall there then any man be put to death this day in Israel? For do I not know that I am this day king over Israel? Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware unto him. Shimei comes back. He apologizes. We find out in verses 24 through 30, Mephibosheth never turned on David. We said, man, that kills you when you're king. Your friends kick you when you're down. Read 2 Samuel 19, 24 through 30. Mephibosheth did not do that. It was something that his servant worked up and tried to pin on Mephibosheth. Gracious people, beautiful moments. David tries to reward Barzillai, who gave him the food while they were fugitives against Absalom. He tries to invite, we're going to talk more about this when we come back because we need to, but he invites him to come over across Jordan, and Barzillai just says, You don't want me, I'm too old. But this is what Barzillai does. He says, But behold, verse number 37, Behold, Chimham, let him go over with my lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good unto thee. And the king answered, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do with him that which shall seem good unto thee, and whatsoever thou shalt require of me will I do for thee. And the people went over Jordan, and when the king was come over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned unto his own place. Barzillai says, I'm too old, but how about this? Take a young man with you. Give him a good start in his life. These are gracious people, and David is just ruining every bit of it. Joab says, You love your enemies more than you love your friends. This does not match to Matthew 5:44. Somebody says, well, Jesus says that we ought to love our enemies. Jesus does not say to love your enemies and hate your friends. What does match to David's behavior is Matthew 12:30. He that's not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me is scattered abroad. Sometimes in life you have to pick sides. You just have to. It's just the way that it is, and there is no such thing as neutrality. If you try to select neutrality, you are in fact helping the bad side because you're not helping the good side. Jesus dealt in absolutes, Matthew chapter 12, verse number 30. He makes it worse. When everything gets done, Joab and Amasa, they're cousins, and we said Joab went out seeming with no hesitation to kill his cousin. But then when they all come home, David says to Amasa, Art thou not of my bone and my flesh? God do so to me, and more also, if thou be not captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab. I do believe that David is punishing Joab because Joab killed Absalom. Doing his job. Everybody sees it. Everybody's having a hard time. Now, when you read your text, they're going to have a fight. They're all having a good moment, supposed to be having a good moment. Behold, all the men of Israel came to the king and said unto the king, Why have our brethren the men of Judah stolen thee away, and have brought the king and his household and David's men with him over Jordan? And all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, Because the king is near of kin to us. Wherefore then be ye angry for this matter? Have we eaten at all the king's cost, or hath given us any gift? And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, We have 10 parts in the king, and we have also more right in David than ye. Why then did ye despise us, that our advice should not be first had in bringing back our king? And the word of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. In my opinion, David calls this fighting back in verse number 11 of chapter 19, where he essentially said to Judah, when he says, Why have y'all not come back to get me? I believe he's saying to them, y'all got a problem? Whereas all the people wanted to be involved in bringing him home, it became a thing particular to Judah, and now everybody is fighting about it. And look what happens in chapter 19, verses 1 through 3. And there happened to be there a man of Belial, whose name was Sheba, and a Benjamite. He blew a trumpet and said, We have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man in his tents, O Israel. So every man of Israel went up after David and followed Sheba, the son of Betrayal, however you want to say his name. But the men of Judah clave unto their king from Jordan, even in Jerusalem. And David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took 10 women as concubines, whom he had left to keep the house, put them in ward, fed them, but went not into them, so they were shut up unto the day of their death, living in the widowhood. All of that he allowed from the beginning, Amon, Absalom, take it easy on Absalom, comes home. I don't think he did good advice with the people of Judah, created a whole nother fight, and now he's got a whole nother rebellion on his hands. But here's how we conclude this morning. I say, is this the end of David? And this is where somebody says, we supported David through thick and thin, but that day we just couldn't go any further. And this is where I say, so I hear you, but essentially what you're saying is in the moment when David needed you, you left. And so I say, as we started this class, you, your preacher, and your elders, as you are looking at people who are imperfect people, I think that the better idea is for you to speak the truth with them. And we know we would rather just leave the congregation than have a confrontation. I think the better idea is to speak the truth like Joab did to David. You have treated us worse than your enemy today. And we're not talking about being belligerent. We're not talking about having it out. We're talking about brother to brother. We love each other. And like we started in Colossians chapter 3, verse number 12, the bond of perfectness, being thankful to even get to be in the body together. We supported David through thick and thin, but at that time we just had to give up. And I say to that, 1 Corinthians 13:4, charity suffers long. I think maybe sometimes we need to hang in a little bit longer and try to see if we can help them out if we can. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can. We should have more What Does the Bible Say tonight at 9 o'clock. And then I'll be live tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being interested in spiritual things. You keep asking, what does the Bible say? You have a good rest of the day. God bless you.
12.